Call of Duty is a 20-plus-year-old franchise, and Zombies on its own is a nearly 2-decade-old mode. We've received dozens of maps, over a dozen different games with Zombies modes attached, tons of different events, experiences, DLC releases, launches, hundreds of guns, tons of enemy types, perks, power-ups, and so much more. It's a massively content-filled mode in a game that follows an annual release schedule, typically 2 to 3 year development cycles. With such a tight turnaround, there's bound to be things that don't make the cut, either because they're too complex for the final product, they were too ambitious for the limitations of the game or the hardware, or because the team was just workshopping simple stuff early on that they didn't feel lended well to the final release that we ultimately received as the general public and consumer. Now, of course, decades of content means decades of cut content. Some pretty innocent stuff is usually what you see as traditional cut content. A gun here or there, a perk or a room off the side of a map, an enemy type, the location of things that changed in the final product, a trap or two, things like that. Most games' cut content don't drastically contribute to the final product in a meaningful way where the content that was cut would have made for an entirely different experience. Just a marginally different one that would have eventually faded into the background or be mostly forgotten, or perhaps be more of a footnote on the experience. Hence why these things typically get cut. They're not load-bearing, critical parts of the end product, so they can be scrapped without hurting the result. COD Zombies, on the other hand, has a lot of insane cut content that would have delivered essentially transformatively different experiences on some pretty major maps and releases. Some of the community's favorite maps could have potentially been wildly different experiences, with entirely different storylines, map structures, weapon inclusions, mission styles, and Easter eggs, everything. Maps like Mob of the Dead and Origins immediately come to mind due to leaked alpha builds from a couple of years back showing significantly larger, more expansive versions of each map, with features never seen again in either the final product or any other final product post-release, or features that were shelved for 5+ years and used multiple games later as fresh new ideas. So I want to dive in for this video into the history of insane cut content in COD Zombies that would have drastically changed the game we all know today. Things that would have made Zombies very different from the Zombies we know now. This is what I truly think is the craziest cut content in COD Zombies history. And because I don't have $1 million in my bank account to fight off a horde of Activision Blizzard lawyers, I'm not going to show these things on screen. However, I will be talking about them in great detail, so you can use the power of your imagination to envision what I'll be talking about. Things included in massive dev file leaks and never to be released to the public early dev builds of the game that I just can't take the risk of being struck down by the powers that be. I hope you understand. Now let's strap in and take a trip down alternate memory lane. Now, if you've been a member of the Zombies community for a long time, you probably remember the earliest rumors of cut content. More often than not, just a bunch of community fan theories suggesting that we were missing Easter egg content that could have potentially been undiscovered in the game, but more than likely was cut. A lot of these things never panned out to be true, but one of the major pieces of hidden content that turned out to be cut content in the end was a perk on World at War's Derice, a perk called Ammo-matic. Essentially, Ammo-matic was a max ammo buy, which we've become used to in the modern era of Zombies, including Cold War, Black Ops 6, and Black Ops 7 with the ammo cache. But back in the day of World at War, in the earlier Black Ops games, we could have had a perk that would grant us max ammo on our weapons. This was eventually scrapped, and according to Jason Blundell, the Zombies creative director, it didn't serve to the game's core gameplay loop, which relied on ammo being a scarcity. But we do have texture files, voice lines, and models. I'll throw the texture file up on screen now so you can see what this looked like. This proves that this was in the game, ready to go, and scrapped in the final stages of development in favor of our main 4 perks that we know and love today: Quick Revive, Juggernog, Speed Cola, and Double Tap. But imagine a world where we had 5 perks in World at War, and a game with a 4 perk limit where we had no reason to make a choice about our top 4. You could buy every single one. Something that stuck through multiple COD games. Having an extra perk like that could have been greatly beneficial to high round runs, filling back up your wonder weapons, etc. It would have been a massive change to the gameplay loop of World at War Zombies, and ultimately could have knocked another perk down a peg as a staple core 4. A crazy piece of cut content that would have drastically changed World at War and our entire perk system as we know it today. And moving on to another piece of World at War cut content, did you know that Kino der Toten was technically cut content before it became the launch map of Black Ops 1? Kino der Toten was originally planned to be World at War's 4th DLC map, giving the game 5 maps in total, not including any other rumored cut content maps that would have been in the game. This is a map that is so firmly associated with Black Ops 1 and often ranked as one of the greatest maps of all time, and it could have been a part of an entirely different game, delivering an entirely different experience based on engine limitations, less development time, and years less of continued iteration and creative changes. Who knows what that version of Kino der Toten could have been? What we do know, though, is that it was cut from World at War due to time constraints and shifted over to Black Ops 1 development and reworked for the game that it eventually released in. The rest of Black Ops 1 mostly featured simple cut content like weapons and out-of-bound expansions to maps that we still featured today but walled off from player access. By all technicality, more restricted content than it was cut. There's still assets that exist in the game but just weren't featured in the final product as interactable areas or usable weapons. Things like the AK-47 that were in multiplayer but not in Zombies, or things like the 4th lander that we could see on Ascension, which you couldn't access but you could see out of the bounds of the map. There were also a couple of weird alternate reality shifts that could have happened in Black Ops 1, things that are pretty cut content adjacent. Things like the Wunderwaffe originally being featured in Kino instead of the Thunder Gun, or the weird world where Kino der Toten Stoughton was never in Black Ops 1 because it already came out in World at War, leaving us in a world where Black Ops 1's launch map was either 5 or the game's eventual DLC 1, Ascension. There is one big piece of cut content though in Black Ops 1 that I haven't talked about yet, the craziest piece of cut content in almost all of Zombies history, the long fabled Paris map. For years, zombie fans have talked about the mysterious Paris Zombies map that we had rumblings and rumors about for ages. Allegedly, this map was Black Ops 1's final DLC, a zombies map in Paris featuring the Eiffel Tower and a research facility in France. This was eventually reworked in the map that we did get as Black Ops 1's final DLC, Moon, which was confirmed by Jason Blundell in an interview earlier this year. In this version of the map, we would have never seen the Easter egg ending of blowing up the Earth from the Moon's research base. We would likely have never seen the wave gun and its microwave ability using the lack of oxygen and gravity impacts on the Moon to shape the damage that it did to zombies. And we would have never had the Earth to Moon teleportation cycle, Pack-a-Punch at Area 51, or the astronaut stalker zombie. And we'll never truly know that version of Black Ops 1 or that ending to the Black Ops 1 zombies storyline. And likely, because Treyarch doesn't often reuse settings for maps, we probably would have never seen Black Ops 2's Origins, another map taking place in France, meaning the history of zombies in its entirety could have been drastically reshaped if this Paris map was never reworked into the Moon that we all know and love today, potentially removing a community favorite greatest of all time zombies map with Origins, completely wiping out the existence of Moon, and changing the zombie storyline forever. Arguably one of the biggest what-ifs in zombies history, and a huge butterfly effect that could have happened if things worked out a little differently. One of the craziest pieces of cut content we've received in any zombies game. Now moving on to Black Ops 2, this game is full of cut content galore. This game's cut content was the inspiration for this video, mainly because of some major leaks that I alluded to earlier on. These leaks involving Mob of the Dead and the aforementioned Origins, maps that were drastically cut down in scope on final release, and would have potentially been significantly different experiences if not for time crunch and development constraints. Now again, I cannot show these dev builds on screen of the original leaked versions of these maps, but there are places online that you can see footage and screenshots from these versions of the maps. Feel free to go and look at them while I'm talking about it in detail here. First, Mob of the Dead in its original form. It was more like Black Ops 4's Blood of the Dead, an almost one-to-one remake of the real-life Alcatraz that the team scoped out in the early 2010s before they started development on Black Ops 2. If you played Warzone's Resurgence mode on Rebirth Island, you pretty much know what the original Mob of the Dead looked like. It featured the exact same layout with accessible additional buildings, outside large roads and walkways, the new industry buildings and research labs and underground mine tunnels, catwalk, and more from Blood of the Dead that we got in Black Ops 4, the tower and courtyard areas that were featured in the Warzone version, and more. And these were all things that, yes, we got later down the line, but they were all intended for the original Black Ops 2 Mob of the Dead release. And eventually we did get one of the greatest maps of all time with Mob of the Dead, but we got so much more teased to us in the alpha leaked build that could have gave us a more expansive and different version of this map. One that had significantly more playable areas, different mechanics, and a hugely different layout, and likely a very different community reception. Blood of the Dead, where we did get a lot of these features eventually ported forward, was not well received by the community. So would Mob of the Dead have still been as well loved today if it was more like the Blood of the Dead version that came out later? Would it have included all of the same mechanics that folks tend to think are the worst versions of Mob of the Dead? Probably not, and there's a good reason. Beyond dev crunch and time constraints, Treyarch and the team removed a lot of the cut areas and content from the map because they just weren't necessary to still deliver a great experience. Usually the reason why cut content is cut in the first place. And the same goes for Origins, a map that originally featured an entire French village in addition to the map that we know now. Something that would have greatly expanded on the scope of the map, but would have left us with an entirely different end product. We mostly know Origins as a tattered battlefield, the World War I muddy, rainy, snowy trenches. We don't think of it as a real occupied French town that happened to be overrun by zombies and warfare, but that would have been the version we received in this cut content alpha build of the map. A map that would have had an entirely different tone and story to it. Now on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Transit, a map that suffered due to its cut content, and one of the potentially biggest swings in quality caused by the cuts that it suffered. One of the craziest pieces of cut content that we've never received. The original Transit as it was envisioned by Jimmy Zielinski and the Treyarch team. A map that featured significantly less lava, less fog, more playable area, and lent more to the original open world concept than it eventually delivered due to massive hardware constraints and the inability to be as wide open, wide-reaching, and content-filled as it wanted to be. We would have seen additional areas like an expanded version of the town, the power plant, and the diner zones. Additional playable modes for Transit like Meet and Race, later leaked with their own assets, loading screens, voice lines, and even weapons, like a zombified decapitated Richtofen head that would bite at you, or throwable pieces of zombie flesh. But all of that doesn't even account for the craziest piece of cut content in all of Black Ops 2, the original Zombies Chronicles. Black Ops 3 eventually featured a DLC 5, something that the community mostly joked about every single COD release, always grasping at just one more DLC pack, one more set of maps. Except Black Ops 3 actually delivered on that and gave us remastered maps from every previous game. Fan favorite maps that we could enjoy in a modern setting, in a modern engine, with modern graphics. But that almost never happened, because we were actually meant to receive this in Black Ops 2 after Origins as the original DLC 5 Zombies Chronicles. And recently these maps were also leaked to the community, fully playable, Easter egg-enabled final versions of Black Ops 1's entire map set ported into Black Ops 2. Kino, 5, Ascension, Shang, Moon, all of it. And it didn't stop there either. This scrap DLC 5 also featured the full suite of World at War maps, so it was essentially Zombies Chronicles porting forward every single existing Zombies map from all of Zombies history up through the end of Black Ops 2, making the game the original potential definitive version of Zombies, the way to play every Zombies experience in one place. Ultimately, yet another scrapped piece of content, arguably one of the potential biggest shifts that hit Zombies or any piece of cut content in the mode's history. If Black Ops 2 would have received Zombies Chronicles, it's unlikely that we would have ever received it in Black Ops 3, a world with no remastered, remade, and rebuilt versions of the maps that we received in BO3 Zombies Chronicles DLC 5. Instead, Black Ops 3 would have only featured its own standard maps, and Black Ops 2 would have gotten the crown as the definitive Zombies title with the most content and the place to experience nearly the full storyline from start to finish. And I'm personally glad that this ended up as cut content, because I don't think by the mode's third game we needed something this grand in scope yet. Black Ops 2 wasn't a massive graphical leap above Black Ops 1, and it didn't have a lot of major mechanic changes. Black Ops 3, however, did, and it ended up giving us beautiful and thoughtfully remade versions of these maps with actual new gameplay changes. But imagine a world where none of this ever happened. You'd be playing Moon on Black Ops 2 right now. And in that same vein, Black Ops 3 Zombies Chronicles even has some rumored cut content, including what eventually became Black Ops 4's Blood of the Dead as a remastered Mob of the Dead, meant to be featured alongside the game's DLC 5, as well as Transit, but in its fuller, more true-to-concept form, eventually brought to life in Black Ops 7 as Ashes, the game's launch map, something we also potentially would have never seen if it was originally released in Black Ops 3 as intended. Now, fast-forwarding to Black Ops 6, the most recent round of cut content, and the last game that we can really talk about because we're actively in Black Ops 7's lifecycle right now, and they're still cutting content as we speak. The biggest piece of rumored cut content here being the original Liberty Falls concept. Liberty Falls, per Treyarch's official Zombies art book, which features concept art from the game's original development cycle, was meant to be a darker, more atmospheric, larger-scale map with more outbreak mechanics like Cold War. It had a massive Orda-like looming giant enemy, more zones and regions that allowed it to be played in a more open-world style, featuring the other maps that eventually released as post-launch content through Black Ops 6's lifecycle, and would have ultimately been a significantly improved version of what we eventually received, a lifeless, boring husk of the original concept that it could have been. Hence why I'm including it as one of the craziest pieces of cut COD Zombies content, something that could have turned a bad game with a bad launch into a great game with a really cool launch and a fantastic intro map. Now that's a lot of potential what-ifs. COD Zombies has had a rocky, insane, cool roller coaster of a life cycle. It's got a ton of history behind it, and there's a world where that entire history book could have been rewritten, drastically different from what we all know today. Some really insane pieces of cut content could have made the world of Zombies something entirely unique from our own lived reality. What do you think the craziest piece of cut content from COD Zombies was? What do you wish could have come from these never-seen parts of the game? Let me know your thoughts and your what-ifs for COD Zombies. And of course, if you liked this video, drop me a comment and a like, and let me know if I should do more videos like this. That's all I've got for now, and I'll see you in the next one.